Okay.
Okay, so we are at the end of the month of Sivan, and tonight is actually Rosh Chodesh. So we've spoken so many times, Linda, about Rosh Chodesh, and you were at one time organizing Rosh Chodesh events and
In my synagogue, yeah.
your synagogue, and I've organized many Rosh Chodesh events. So right now we having a Rosh Chodesh event ourselves because
Very nice.
the month of Sivan is coming to an end, and we are entering into the month of Tammuz. So Tammuz is a really interesting month, and it has a lot of teachings for us. And
are the months about the same length, the Hebrew months, as the English months?
Well, they're not exactly the same. The lunar months are a little shorter than the solar months. That's why they don't align up exactly one with the other. And so that's why every few months, every few years, you need to have a leap year where they put in a whole extra lunar month. And then instead of having only 1 month of Adar, we need 2 months of Adar so that the lunar months and the solar months can kind of be more or less in sync. And they have to keep bringing the lunar months in sync with the solar months so that Pesach, which is set on the lunar calendar, it's the 14th day of Nisan, it'll always come in the spring.
Sounds complicated. The 12-month system, is it 12 months a year, more or less?
So we have 12 months, but the months are
different
maybe a day or two. I think that the English months are 30 or 31 days, and the Hebrew months, maybe they 28 or 29 days. Sometimes there's a 30th, but there's almost never a 31st, I don't think. So if they were starting off neck and neck, the solar calendar and the lunar calendar, the lunar calendar would keep slipping a little bit. It would keep going a little ahead of the solar because it's slightly shorter months until they wouldn't be in sync. And then Pesach might end up being in the summer or in the fall or in the winter. So in order to make sure that Pesach will always be in the spring, they have to keep making sure that those two calendars are aligned. So if the lunar calendar is getting too far ahead, they put in an extra month to give the solar calendar time to catch up. And it's interesting that the Muslims also follow a lunar calendar, but they don't have it. They don't calculate it with a leap year, and they don't keep trying to align with the solar calendar the way we do. So Muslims do have their holidays at, like.
Yeah, I thought so. Like Ramadan seems to be a different time each year.
Yeah, so it can be completely different times because they don't have to keep aligning with the solar calendar. Whereas in the Jewish faith, there's a tremendous teaching about the astronomy and astrology, and the old Jewish teachers had a huge amount of knowledge, and they were able to calculate really when's the solstice and when's the this and when's the that, and all kinds of astrological calculations that were almost to a second. They very carefully calculated the calendar because it's a big thing. The whole of Jewish life is based around that calendar, and it starts that Pesach has to be in the spring because the holiday is all about rebirth.
Right.
So it has to sync that it will always be in the spring, and then all the other holidays are sort of seasonally aligned.
Right.
Seasonally collected. So each month has an energy. So according to Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of formation, which is
say it again, the what?
Sefer
name-
Yetzirah. Sefer
Sephira.
Yetzirah.
Yetzirah.
Yeah. I'm just telling this other person that she might want to come on now. Teaching.
Yes, Susan texted me back. She said, family. She'll contact me when she leaves.
Okay, so I just want to tell you about Sefer Yetzirah, but I was telling somebody else about it, so I was just maybe she wants to come on, so I'll just copy the link, copy and send it to her. So Sefer Yetzirah is believed to have been written by Abraham Avinu, Abraham our father. It's one of the most, first texts that we even know we have. There's a tradition that it was written by Abraham. And in that text, there's kind of personalities outlined for each month. What's the work of the month, what's body part is of the month, what, not always a body part actually, but what tribe of the 12 tribes. And also Kabbalistically, it says that Hashem created the whole world from the Aleph base, the Hebrew letters. So even the calendar, each month was sort of engineered through a particular letter. And so each month has a letter. So it's fun to go through all of those things, and then one gets an idea of what's the energy of the month. And then usually the holidays that come out in that month are somewhat connected to those energies. So the energy of this month, or let's even start with the area of healing of this month, is seeing. Perfecting and correcting our way of seeing the world, that we could have a distorted way of seeing the world. And in this month, we have an opportunity to work on seeing things as they really are. So that's what the challenge is of this month. And then that challenge comes into all the Torah readings of this month and the holidays of this month, that there's usually like a theme running through the events of the month that fit into the month and the weather, and it all kind of fits in. So
What's the name of the month again?
Tammuz. The name of the month is Tammuz. So it's interesting because the name Tammuz is from a Babylonian idol, and the idol was called Tammuz. Now, what happened with the idol of Tammuz is very interesting, because the way to worship this idol was that people would make kind of soap dramas, kind of dramatic presentations of calamities and very melodramatic dramas.
Yeah.
And the way of kind of participating in these dramas was crying false tears. Like there's a whole thing about the idol that was like false drama and crying over non-real dramas. That's sort of the historical way of that they served this idol of Tammuz. So that energy, so for one thing, it's very strange that we have a month going from not a Jewish name, but a Babylonian name, and then it's named after Babylonian idol. It's like a little weird. But that idea of crying over non-real calamities is very typical. So last week, it wasn't Tammuz yet, but the story of the spies, when they came back and they said that they can't enter in the land, that's a kind of very typical Tammuz kind of energy, even though it was last week coming into the Tammuz energy. But that's a very typical kind of Tammuz story, that they had the opportunity to go into the land. Hashem would have helped them. The energies were in their favor, and yet these 10 out of 12 tribes came and talked everyone out of it. And then, oh, we're so sad, we can't enter into the land. But it was totally self-generated from not seeing correctly. So now this month is supposed to be the fixing of that. But we'll see that we have more to fix. Even another thing that we see when in not correct seeing got the Jews in trouble was the whole story with Moshe going up to Har Sinai to get additional information from Hashem, to get really the oral Torah, because really the 10 commandments were like the cliff notes of the Torah. And then Moshe's like, this is just the cliff notes. I'm going to go hang out with Hashem for 40 days and 40 nights, and then I'll come back and I'll give you more details. Okay. And so when the people calculated the 40 days and the 40 nights, it seemed that he was late. But not only did it seem that he was late, but according to Jewish tradition, there was a deliberate attempt from the Satan to get them to believe that Moshe not only was late coming back, but that he was never going to come back. And in fact, that he had died and he was never coming back. So Jewish tradition tells us there's actually a medrash that the Satan, the other side, the negative, the opposite of connected to God and seeing truth, the other side of that, they saw like a hologram vision or image of Moshe lying on a coffin or something dead. And somehow this image was projected that they saw it. How did they see it? And how was this image projected? We can guess, but that's what our teachers tell us, that somehow this image was communicated to them of Moshe dead, and they all panicked and they're like, oh no, how are we going to function if we don't have a leader and a mentor and a guide and a shepherd and a this and a that? And so then they were vulnerable for this idea of, well, why don't we do what we used to do in Egypt? Let's throw some gold into fire and we'll create some kind of idol. So that's also, their eyes were misled. And because their eyes were misled, they made a huge mistake. And then we see today also there's going to be another big mistake. We'll talk about it after. So this month is about, can we try and work on ourselves to see what's really there and see what's really the truth, and not buy into false narratives around our own stuff and around political stuff.
Yeah.
Like, can we see what's really there? So the whole month of Tammuz is about seeing things as they really are and fixing this idea of seeing. And the tribe that's connected with this month, his name even means see. Reuven, Reuben. Leah says when she was having all her children, well, he was her firstborn, and she gets pregnant right away from that first night when, I don't know if you know the story. You know the story, right? Yaakov thought he was marrying Rachel,
right?
But the father said, in our community, we don't marry the youngest sister before the older sister,
right?
Without letting.
So he tricked him
So he thought he was being with Rachel, but really he was being with Leah. So Jewish tradition tells us that he was meant to be with Leah, and it was all meant to be like that, but still it was pretty intense.
It was trickery, yeah.
A lot of trickery. But when Leah...
But he ended up loving Leah, right?
Well, Leah had 6 of the 12 tribes, and Yaakov is buried with Leah in the Ma'arat HaMachpelah in Hebron, like we spoke about last week.
Right.
So they certainly had a strong connection in some ways, and it says that that the 2 partnerships that he had with Rachel and he had with Leah one is a kind of inner partner, and one was more of an outer partner.
Okay.
I mean, with Leah, he founded half of all the tribes, and he's buried
Right.
with her for all eternity in the cave Marata Machpelah. So
Well, who found the other 6 tribes?
So 6 tribes went to Leah,
Right.
and before she had all 6, I think maybe she had 4. Rachel took a handmaiden, Bila, and Bila had 2. So now we're up to 8. Then Leah took a handmaiden, Zilpah, and she had 2. So
Okay.
now we're up to 10. And
So
then
all from Yaakov?
yes, and then Rachel, finally, she has Yosef, and
Right.
she gets pregnant, and she has Benjamin. And then once Yosef is born, she's already pregnant with Benjamin. And after Yosef is born, Yaakov thinks now he can go back to Israel and confront his brother Esav and deal with the whole family crisis. And then we know that on the way, Rachel
Died in
gave
childbirth.
birth on the way to Benjamin. And she's buried right out by Beit Lechem over there.
Right. Mm.
And at some point, I'm not sure in the story when Leah, Ruvain is actually collecting, maybe Leah has had 5 of the 6 tribes, and then Ruvain is collecting these fertility drugs from the gardens, from the fields, mandrakes, and he kind of comes to his mother and he has a gift of these mandrakes. And I'm guessing that everybody knew what these mandrakes could do, and Reuven probably knew it, and Rachel knew it, and Leah knew it. So when Rachel sees that Reuven's bringing these mandrakes to his mother, Rachel says, please, can I have the mandrakes? She hadn't had any children at all. She can have the mandrakes. And so Leah sells Rachel the mandrakes, but says, in exchange for giving you the mandrakes, I'm going to have this night with Yaakov.
Okay.
And so Rachel gets the mandrakes, but Leah gets Yaakov and has another child. She gets pregnant that night as well.
Real Earth Mother.
So she's very fertile. And then later, Rachel has Yosef, and then, so I'm not sure. I know that Leah had 6, but I don't know the order of the last couple that she had. But she does have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, like right away. Then Bila, then Zilpah, and then maybe she then has the last 2 or last 1, and then Rachel has. So I don't know the exact.
Did she have any daughters? Did Leah have any daughters?
So Leah had a daughter, Dinah.
Oh, Dinah, that's right.
Dinah. And then we know what happened to Dinah, that number 1.
She ran off with the Canaanite or something?
Well, no, she, so what happened with Dinah is that when Yaakov was going back to meet his brother, and he had Yosef, and now he felt empowered to return to Canaan and to engage with Esav, he didn't want Esav to see his daughter, because he thought that if Esav sees his daughter, Esav is going to want to be with her, marry her, and he didn't want her to marry Esav, so he hid her in a trunk. He hid. So let me see who's here. Hello?
You got a live one.
Wait, who's knocking on my window? Hello? Hi. Oh, you came? Oh, well, the door's open.
I think that's awesome, Mommy. I mean, they would be beloved friends if he needs to come and be with Dad. Maybe do some leave taking. You know, Dad doesn't look like he's gonna be hanging in there that long.
He is such a
He's very fat. And I think she got skinny lately. That's for sure.
You want to be in the room with the blankie? Because you're the only one here. Do you want to sit? Do you want to sit here, or do you want to sit in the corner with the blanket? You won't be on the video, I promise you. You want to sit here, and I'll just sit there, and I'll talk. Okay, I'll give you a blanket. I'll give you 2 blankets. I'll give you lots of blankets. If you told me that you were coming, then I would know. Okay, so do you want more than 1 blanket? Okay, so I'm telling, so Linda, so, hi. Okay, so there we go. Oh, look, we sort of, I said we live and not live, but I got a surprise. Okay, so Shoshana's here
Hi, Shoshana.
in Poison.
Oh,
Okay,
nice.
So
Dina.
So yeah, so I was telling you about Dina. So we've been talking about Yaakov and his wives, and did he have any daughters? And he had a daughter, and the daughter was Dina. I can't. Do you want a drink? Do you want some water?
So nothing happened with Dina and the Canaanites.
Okay, so Yaakov comes back to Canaan, and he hid Dina away so that Esau wouldn't see her.
Okay.
So they come back to Canaan, and then Dina decides that she's like, this is the way I've heard it. She's like a Lubavitcher, and she decides that she needs to go out and talk to the people of Shechem, and and maybe she's trying to bring them, words of wisdom or whatever. We don't know why she went out into Shechem. She goes out into Shechem and she gets raped.
What's Shem?
Shechem.
What is Shem?
Shechem.
Shechem. What is that?
It's a person and a place.
Oh.
It's a person and a place. You don't know the story. So Shechem rapes Dina, and then
I knew she got raped, but I thought it was by a Canaanite.
No, it was a Shechem. Well, Shechem was living in Canaan.
Oh, okay.
He was a Canaanite.
Okay.
He rapes her, but then he decides he loves her and he wants to marry her. So they come to Yaakov and they say, I don't know, Shechem and his father, whatever, they come to Yaakov and they say, look, my son raped your daughter, but really he loves her and he wants to marry her. So Yaakov says, she can't marry into uncircumcised family or uncircumcised people. So everybody has to get a bris, and I think it seems like he's agreeing to the plan. Meantime, brothers of Dina, Shimon and Levi, say, what? This guy raped our sister, and now you're going to let him marry her? What kind of disgrace is that? What do you think we are, Drek? And Shimon and Levi go, and they, when the people of Shechem have all taken a bris, Shimon and Levi go and they murdered every one of them.
Right.
And then Yaakov is like, oh my gosh, what have you done? This is not the way that we would establish our reputation as a peace-loving people. And then Yaakov, on his deathbed, he curses Shimon and Levi for their anger, and they don't. It's something that lives on in. I think Shimon is the only one of the tribes that doesn't get a brocha.
Oh.
But they defended the
honor of their sister.
So that's.
But she wanted to marry him, right?
Oh, but wait a minute. It's not the end of the soap opera. So Dina gets pregnant from Shechem. So now she comes back into the family and she's pregnant. So exactly what happens, we don't really know, but it somehow turns out that Dina lands up in Egypt.
Okay.
And there are there's a tradition that when Yosef marries, when Yosef marries in Mitzrayim, it's Dinah's daughter, Osnat, who marries Yosef.
Oh,
Somehow Dinah lands up in Mitzrayim, and Dinah's daughter is the woman that Yosef marries and has his two children, Ephraim and Manasseh.
okay.
So that's the story there. But that
More
was a little
story.
bit of a detour.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a detour. So we're talking about Tammuz, and we're talking about the fact that Tammuz is a month of fixing vision and seeing things correctly, and not so nice that you're here, a real person.
My birthday's in Tammuz.
And what
23rd.
23rd. So
It's fixing vision.
fixing vision, seeing things as they really are, not as one thinks or wishes them to be. And the tribe that's connected, that's what we were saying, was Leah's firstborn, that she gets pregnant right away, and she has a son, and she says, now maybe now, look, I have a son, Re'u Ben, I have a son, maybe now Yaakov will love me. And every one of her children that she's naming, they all a little bit of, maybe now Yaakov will pay attention to me. Maybe now Yaakov will, each name is a little bit of a commentary on where she's holding in her life and what she's trying to, most of it is how she's trying to get attention from Yaakov, actually, most of the names.
Wow.
Anyway, so that is,
Did Yaakov have any other wives?
other than those four, well,
Oh,
the
4?
two wives and their maids.
Handmaidens? Oh.
That's enough, Linda. That's
I know.
That's a lot.
It
That is
is.
a lot. Okay, so seeing clearly, opening one's eyes. Okay, that's and then the letter of the month that this is the letter Ches, Chuppah. So yeah, and then yeah. So that is a lot about Tammuz. So that's a good introduction of Tammuz, and that's the piece of Tammuz. So I think that's good for the Tammuz piece. Good.
Yes.
Moving
Let me
on.
ask just one question. Weird question.
Yes.
When did they start calling themselves Jews?
There were 12 tribes, and then there was a tribe of, and then 10 of them got lost somehow, and of the 2 remaining tribes, one was Yehuda, the tribe of Yehuda. So then they became
Oh. Okay.
But when Yaakov was on his way to meeting Esav, he had the fight with the angel, and the angel says, you were known as Yaakov, but now you're going to be called Yisrael. So that's where that name comes from.
Okay.
Yisrael means you strived with man and with God, and you were victorious.
Okay.
But the Yehuda part, I think it's when they entered into Israel and the 10 tribes kind of get lost, and then the tribes that are remaining are Yehuda, and I think Ephraim, maybe. I'm not even sure which is the other tribe, I'm sorry to say.
That's okay.
So talking about this idea of not seeing clearly and making mistakes from not seeing clearly. So in this week's Parsha, we've got the story of Korach. And Korach is the whole idea of machloket. And machloket is the idea of argument, hiding. And interestingly, in the word machloket, the root of the word is chelek, which is a portion. So usually you can get hints of what's going on from the wording. And machloket is a disagreement or I guess an argument. and the root in that word is chelek, portion. So it's usually I'm angry because I feel like I need a bigger portion for myself. I don't get what I want. I want more. I feel like
Deprived.
I'm deprived. I'm angry. Other people have it all and I don't have it. Why don't I have what they have?
Life isn't fair.
It's not fair. Right. So one of my teachers says that the basis of a lot of machloket is jealousy, that someone else has something and you feel like it's supposed to be yours.
Right.
So in the Ten Commandments, it's really interesting that the way the Ten Commandments are set up. Shoshana, you here? Don't fall asleep.
I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
Okay. The way the Ten Commandments are set up is that there's 5 on the one side, which is how we're supposed to engage with Hashem. Like, don't have other gods before me, don't serve other gods, I'm the Lord your God, whatever. That wasn't in order, but it's about us and God. And on the other side of the tablets are how we're supposed to engage with other people. Don't steal, don't cheat, don't murder, don't be envious. What's that word? Don't covet. That's on the other side. So our teachers tell us that each one on the left is parallel to one on the right, and they have something to do with each other. So on the bottom of the first set, I guess I'm not sure which is left and right, but on the bottom of the first set, it says, "You shall honor your mother and father," which is actually on the bottom of the set of how we're supposed to relate to God. And on the other set, parallel to that, is "do not covet." Do not wish that you had somebody else's stuff.
Right.
So why would they be parallel to another? What's the relationship between those two things? Why is honoring your mother and father connected to not
Coveting.
or wanting someone else's stuff or being jealous of someone else's stuff?
This is a very complicated way.
Yeah, so you have an answer?
Well, the answer is obviously it hadn't occurred to me. Now I lost it. Obviously, because Hashem is the Father, who's designed the entire thing. That He creates another father and another mother, and you have to honor them as if He's given them to you, thereby honoring Him.
Good. So Shoshana said that Hashem has appointed your parents as his emissaries.
He's given them his aspect.
He's given them his aspect, and we respect him as through his shluchim on this world.
This is what he gave you.
And that if this is what he gave you not just his parents, but everything that comes with having those parents.
They're actually divine. They're divinely appointed for you, and there's this narishkeit going around that you pick your own parents, and it's not true.
So if
he
you
actually picks them and sends them.
If you understand that your parents were meant to be your parents, and because your parents were meant to be your parents, everything happened through God's decree and God's design,
Divinity.
Then what you have is what you're meant to have, and what you don't have is what you're meant to not have.
Right.
And if you can accept the first premise that your parents are the parents you were meant to have and you truly love them as a way of loving and honoring Hashem, then you're not going to want anybody else's stuff, and you're not going to want their status, and you're not going to want anything of what they have, because you understand that you, the child of your parents, and what someone else has is irrelevant to you.
So therefore, the root of envy is really not on the
right. So therefore, the root of envy,
and that's why it's so deleterious,
is not honoring Hashem. So Ben Zoma in Pirkei Avos says, Ezehu Ashir, who is a rich person, Hasameach b'chelko, the person who's happy with his own lot, that he got exactly what he's supposed to get. But what happens with Korach? Korach says, what happens with Korach? Korach looks at the politics going on in the Midbar at that time. Where's my other book? Oh, it's in my hand. There it is. Korach looks at the politics at that time and he says, my grandfather, Kahas, had 3 sons, Amram, Yitzhar, and Uziel. One is my father and 2 are my uncles. So my one uncle, Amram, he had 2 sons. Those are my cousins, Moshe and Aaron. They got their positions, they've got their status, they're happy. I'm the son of Yitzhar, and if there's any positions that are needed to be handed out, I'm the next in line. And then Uziel, his son, that's Korach's first cousin, was Elitzaphan. And Moshe chooses that Elitzaphan is going to be the prince of Kahat, this group of families. And Korach gets really angry and he says, that's not right. I should be next in line before Elitzaphan, and it should be me. And then he leads a whole rebellion against Moshe. And what ends up happening is that I actually put it on the shared screen. So let's just like read it inside, because it's kind of fun to see what's happening. So Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kohat, the son of Levi, took himself to one side. He separated himself from everyone, and he confronts Moshe with 250 men, and they all men of repute, and they assemble rebelling really against Moshe and Aaron and say, you've taken on too much of yourself, and you appointing certain people to be in charge and to have, to be a prince over other people. But Korach says, everybody is holy. Why are you choosing some people to have certain positions of importance? And then Moshe obviously did it through being instructed by Hashem. And then he has to justify and explain to everyone why he did what he did. So he's forced to kind of justify Hashem, and he's tells them that then they all start arguing with him. Isn't it enough that you brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert? So suddenly now Egypt, the place where they were oppressed and enslaved, and when they couldn't get enough bricks, their babies were literally put into the walls instead of bricks. I mean,
oh my God,
terrible things. Actually, what we told, that's when that happened, the people finally cried out to Hashem.
They did this in the London Bridge.
Wow.
Oh,
So
can you imagine?
Now they're saying that Mitzrayim was a land of milk and honey, which is a complete, like we said, every time the Jews are complaining, they start fantasizing about how great Mitzrayim was, and then
it's so human.
right,
Yeah,
and
so human.
In the end, I'm not going to read inside. In the end, what happens is that Moshe says to them, if you're not going to desist with this rebellion, let something that's never happened before happen, and let a huge hole open up, and the people got, the people who were with Korach in his evil plans got swallowed up in a hole. I don't know if you saw, but online they were passing around this video that in a parking lot in Eretz Israel, in one of the towns that
Collapse.
there was a huge hole that just like
Sinkhole.
opened up in the, what's it called?
A sinkhole.
A sinkhole. And you saw cars just like falling into the hole, like huge hole opened up, and it happened this week. So it's like pretty intense.
Where?
Was anybody hurt?
I don't know. It was in the parking lot of one of the hospitals in Eretz Israel. I saw cars.
One of the hospitals.
Yeah, I saw cars kind of falling in.
Wow.
But
It happens in Yom HaMelech all the time.
it happens
In
in
Yom HaMelech all the time.
in Yam HaMelech,
The Dead Sea.
in the sea, that there's holes in
Yeah.
underneath the bottom of the sea.
No, in the land around it. Just,
Oh, in the land around the sea.
yeah, terrible, frightening sinkholes.
So
They
So-
follow everything.
yeah, so this was a sinkhole.
That's very bad.
So
And around the hospitals, that's not a good sign.
when the people talk about this story with Korach, they say that the problem with Korach is that he was appearing to be a man of the people. Why are you choosing someone to be in charge and leader? You know, really, he wanted to be chosen himself. It's not that he wanted everyone to be in bold, you know, everyone to have importance. He wanted himself to be chosen to be in that position, number one. And number two, we learn also that if he would have waited and he wouldn't have mounted this rebellion, he in fact was in line to become prince of the whole of Levi, the whole, not just this family of Kohos, but the whole of Levi. But he was so outraged that he wasn't picked, that he had to kind of attack Moshe and Aaron, attack the whole idea that they even in the desert, suddenly, you know, we should be still in Mitzrayim, it's a land of milk and honey. And the idea, in Pirkei Avos, it says, what kind of argument is a valid argument? What kind of argument has the right to really be? What kind of argument has almost like a longevity to it, like a reason to exist in the world? And it says an argument that's for the sake of heaven.
Yeah, that's it.
An argument for the sake of
Right.
heaven. What does that mean, for the sake of heaven? It means that Jewish people argue all the
And
time. The
check
whole of
God.
Gomorrah is arguing and
Right.
different opinions, and
So
You have this-
interpretation of God.
you have this opinion and another person has that opinion, and we try to argue it through and come to, you know, what's the right thing. But Korach, his argument, it says, was not for the sake of heaven, because it was motivated by his self-interest and motivated by his own feeling of jealousy and his own feeling that the chelek, the piece for himself, wasn't what he wanted it to be. And that's interesting. So I want to read something which I thought was really beautiful about honest argument that it says that in the Yerushalmi, which is the Gemara, the Talmud, it expounds on the meaning of the word truth. So if there's an argument, so first of all, before I come into the definition of truth, I just want to share what Jonathan Sachs says, Lord Rabbi, Honorable of blessed memory, Jonathan Sachs. And he says that basically, and this is what's happening in our world all the time, that what happened is that Korach led a populist uprising, and that whenever there's instability in a nation, there's a rising of somebody who's kind of taking advantage of the group and creating discontent. The way he says it's the rise of populism in contemporary politics. Korach was a populist, one of the first in recorded history, and it poses great danger to the future of freedom. And then in his essay, he talks about how the person who's a populist will try and make everybody feel bad about their circumstance. They'll kind of talk about the leaders that are there and stress any deficiencies they have, complain about their circumstance, and then offer themselves as a solution. But it's just really that their own promises and offerings are really just for their own power, and that's populist movement. And Nachmanides says that people only bought into it because after the incident with the tribes from last week, people are feeling very disillusioned, they're upset, they're not going to Eretz Israel, and now it's kind of, the environment is very vulnerable for someone to come and stir up trouble. And he said, the thing about argument is, he's saying also here, is to be able to see where an argument is valid and where it's not valid. And an argument not for the sake of heaven is one that is undertaken just for the sake of victory. An argument for the sake of heaven is for the sake of heaven is for the sake of truth. Like, are you arguing just because you want power? Are you arguing just so you can seize power and be right? Or are you arguing because you're really looking for what's true and what's real? So the way Korach argues, it's self-interested, it's not nuanced, he exploits the vulnerability of the people, he uses all this fantasy of, it was much better back in Egypt, etc., etc. And then now it's interesting to look at this definition of truth that's brought in the Yerushalmi, in the Talmud. It says, the Yerushalmi expounds on the meaning of the word truth, or emet. So in Hebrew, the word for truth is emet. So Aleph is the first letter in Hebrew, Mem is the middle letter, and Taf is the last letter of Hebrew. So you go through this, you're encompassing everything from the beginning to the middle to the end. And it says in the middle is the Mem. The Talmud implies that any single perspective will always be incomplete and therefore untrue. So I'm interested to hear what you think about
Any
this.
single perspective will always be incomplete and untrue.
A single perspective will always be incomplete. The truth contains everything. In other words, the truth has to sort of...
How does that refer back to the letters, beginning, middle, end?
Yeah, it's got the beginning, the middle, and the end. The truth contains everything. And then Yaakov Nagain says, in a corollary to the Yerushalmi, Professor Uriel Simon, my father-in-law, points out that the word sheker, which is lie, is composed of 3 consecutive letters, shin, kuf, resh, and they all come at the end of the alphabet. In other words, you're not seeing the full picture. So what is emet? According to the Yerushalmi, emet is seeing the full picture, the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's a comprehensive view that encompasses everything. Sheker is just a little narrow viewpoint at the end of the alphabet, not a viewpoint that encompasses the whole.
Right, because they leave out the basic concept and they leave out the explanation to get to the conclusion, and that's what people who are trying to prove their point, and they're fanatically, and they don't tell it, that's what's being done today, like conclusively, like this
Oh no.
take Corona,
So well, everyone can't hear you, so okay, so Shoshana was saying that people are jumping onto arguments in present day reality and just presenting one little piece of the story and then representing it as
the conclusion.
and jumping to conclusions. That's not the way you're going to get a comprehensive.
The facts and the explanation and the first the facts and the explanation, then the conclusion, and it's not
right
completed.
So I found that interesting, that the definition of emet, of truth, is this comprehensive picture from the beginning,
It's a
the middle,
triangle,
and the end.
3 pieces.
And
It's a triangle as opposed to a point.
definitely is not comprehensive.
But that's very interesting, the fact that it's a triangle, because that gives it weight as opposed to a point.
Right,
You see,
right. It has depth.
right? It's a
So in terms of Korach, that's just an extremely brief like look at it from the point of view of Korach being self-interested, not coming from a point of truth, but a point of feeling his own position wasn't significant enough. Also, the fact that he didn't wait and see how things unfolded. He didn't have trust in God or trust in the process that what was right for him would in fact come to manifest. He jumps up right away when he doesn't get what he wants and launches into a rebellion. That his rebellion shows his self-interest, that the word for disagreement, or actually machloket is argument, has the word chelek in it as its root, which is a piece, my piece. And that in order to be satisfied with my piece, if we root back to God created the world and God is behind all the decisions of how things are divided up. And as we honor our parents, we honor God. We don't need someone else's stuff. We need to be in harmony with what's come in our way. So that's just like a very, very brief look at Korach, and that what is a good argument? A good argument is for the sake of heaven, where there's what's defined as being for the sake of heaven is where there's a genuine attempt to find truth. And what's an argument not for the sake of heaven is where there's not that genuine attempt to find truth. There's a genuine attempt to prove one's own point to be right. And that's different. And then the final thing is that what is a definition of truth is that it should encompass a beginning, a middle, a whole, like Shoshana says, be a triangle. It's not just one side of the story. It's not just a narrow end of the story. It's the comprehensive viewpoint that takes into consideration all the different factors. So just to finish off, and then we can close, I didn't read the Hayom Yom for today, which I actually think I would like to read. Today's the last day of the month of Sivan, and then the 30th of Sivan. So it says that the Alter Rebbe's response to a young genius who was very well known for how brilliant and intellectual he was. He came for a one-on-one interview with the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe said to him that spiritual and physical are antithetical in their very essence. A superior quality in the physical is a deficiency in the spiritual. Now, I'm actually going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that I believe that there are people in the Hasidic world that believe that Hasidus kind of changed its orientation in relation to this idea, that I think that coming in times of Mashiach, we really need the physical and the spiritual to be both in a wholesome and integrated way. But it says here, and this was the Alter Rebbe's teaching to this young boy in 1795, a superior quality in the physical indicates or suggests a deficiency in the spiritual. In other words, if you're too involved with the physical, if you're too connected and you put too much effort and you're too involved in that, it's going to lead to a deficiency in your spirituality. But I don't think that that's the voda of these times. I think that there has been a shift. But the continuation is the part that I wanted to stress.
It depends what kind of Hasidus you're with.
In material matters, it says one who is satisfied with his lot is an individual of the highest quality. So when it comes to physicality, being satisfied with your lot is a level to ascribe to. That's what we say will lead to a person becoming a healthy, happy person, is that in physical things, they're happy with what they get. And a person with this trait will get to the highest levels. But in spiritual matters, being satisfied with one's lot, with where one is holding spiritually, is actually a deficiency and could lead, chas v'shalom, to a descent. So be ambitious in your spiritual attainments, but when it comes to your physical attainments, try to be modest, be happy with what you've got, and whatever you've got, cultivate a satisfaction with that. But in spiritual things, cultivate the almost like the ambition to try to get to a better and a higher place. So Korach is a person that wanted status and power, so that's not so such a role model. And being satisfied with what you have as a way of even honoring who you are, your parents, and how Hashem located you in this world is actually a pathway to being besimcha. And that is what I have to say. And
I have to make a comment about
I just want to know, when Shoshana comments, can you hear Linda? Because if you can't hear, then
A little bit.
so if you want to comment, I can.
I don't think that Hasidus is I think a true Hasidic person who's really looking for truth is not that wrapped up in the physical world. I think it depends upon one's level and one's capacity to rise, and the guf is not as significant, and I don't think that it's changed radically. I think that if anything, we need to be less involved with the guf than we were, so that the neshama can rise. I think it's actually the opposite today. I think people are becoming more spiritual.
Okay, so Shoshana is suggesting that when I said that there's a change in how the physical is viewed and the spiritual, that Shoshana was saying that it's her belief that as we're getting closer to Mashiach, that one's embrace of the spiritual world should be the focus.
And you're talking about health, and that's a different matter.
And so my understanding is that as we come into the world of Mashiach, the task that Hashem has given us is to live in the physical world and elevate the physical world and imbue it with godliness. And that in previous generations, if it was okay to kind of push the Gashmias aside or see it as a obstacle and just focus on the Ruchnias, that the demands of elevating the physical world and bringing Mashiach necessitates that we involve ourselves in the physical world in order to elevate it. So it's a tricky thing, because if you get lost in the physical world, then you're compromising your spirituality. But the goal of Mashiach-kite, the way of living in a messianic headspace, is that the physical and the spiritual are kind of in sync. And as you wake up spiritually, you're able to utilize the physical world, including your physical body and your good health and your ability to be in the world, to transform the world and elevate it and bring it to a level where Mashiach can be
if you're not healthy,
revealed.
You can't transform the
That's
world.
absolutely true.
Yeah.
So anyway, I will bring the class to an end. Hi, sorry, if you have a comment or a question before.
I actually do.
Okay.
I don't think that's like a new thing. This concept of mixed spiritual and ruchnius. I mean, Rochnish and Gashmish. That's. I'm sorry, I'm eating an ice. I'm just very hot. I don't think it's a new thing at all. It's not like now we're doing it and we never were before.
I think that there were teachings previously about shunning and involvement in Gashmias that was
because they were
part
part
of-
the world.
there was part of the timing that I have heard is no longer the
They were afraid of
the way that
world.
it has to be for the future, that we have to be able to
Can
integrate.
you say that louder? Because I couldn't hear that. You did the timing. Is that what you said? The timing?
They were afraid of the outside world.
So if we looking at Judaism through the ages, so we've had different periods where we've been trying to preserve our culture against a lot of dangerous enemies, outside world, a lot of different
Right.
challenges. But the work of a messianic perspective is that it's not a shunning of the physicality. It has to be an embracing of that physicality and an elevating of the physicality to such an extent that it says that in messianic times, the neshama will actually learn from the body.
Right.
So it is a shift that's a time-based shift. That
Right.
there was an avoda for before, and now there's a new avoda that's evolving and coming into being, where people can't shun the body. They can't live only in a conceptual realm. Malchus is all about Shekhinah embodying into the world, into the lowest aspects of the
How does that play out practically? What because gosh, mystically we're so comfortable that we don't. I don't understand
how does
how
it,
that plays out.
so in practicality it plays out that you can't negate your own emotions, you can't negate your own body, you can't negate your own self, you can't just do the right thing and kind of put your head into things. You've got to, it's your Yiddishkeit has to engage your whole being. It's not, it can't just be, it has to, reality has to penetrate into the physical world. And Ruchnius,
It doesn't sound new. I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound. I mean, it doesn't sound like a new thing. I think. I mean, Rashi had a vineyard, and he was busy with his vineyard, and the non-Jewish world uses wine and alcohol and gets it caught in Gashmias, and we use it. We're not like Malachim, like not ever having. We use it as a ruchnistic thing for Kiddush and
I
Arbacoso. So
I agree with you. I think you're bringing a good point. It's not that Judaism, since Har Sinai, we're trying to integrate physicality with spirituality. That's the whole accomplishment of mitzvahs, and that's what happened at Har Sinai was mitzvahs to elevate the physical world and Torah to come down from a higher realm and penetrate into
right. So how is it different now when you're considering a messianic time? Because we're so affluent physically that we have to.
It's not about affluent physically. It's that things have to, that the integration has to go to another level. That the integration has to go to another level. The only way I can say it is
At another level of,
so
because we're so close to.
In terms of people, maybe in previous generations, if people just did the right thing and they just said the right thing and they just didn't speak Lashon Hara, and inside their heart they were having all kinds of traumas and things were churning, and it was just like, but they said the right thing and they thought the right thing. Maybe for previous
Right.
generations that was okay. It's not okay anymore. Now we have to work things out all the way into our kishkas, and it can't just be intellectual. It has to penetrate all the way down. And our land.
Why? Because there's so much. Why? Because there's so much tumult that we can't just do the right thing and.
Because God doesn't want to just live in compartments. He wants the whole thing to integrate. He wants the physical to be integrated with the spiritual. He wants the whole thing to really come together in a much more integrated way. I feel like I'm not explaining it so well.
No, what you said sounds like we always are. It's okay. You know what? It's okay, Bracha.
No,
It sounds to me like
it's a very good question. It's like for a long time, since Rashi had his vineyard and since the Jewish people were, working in Israel, we've had a long, long exile. And Yiddishkeit has been from the neck up. And people are not working in the fields and they're not healthy and they're not holistic and they're not integrated.
oh, so we're not like working the land. We just sit in front of a computer or.
It's not just the land, it's the land of your being, the land of your heart, the land of your stomach, the land of your psyche, the land of your relationships. Yiddishkeit and godliness and Torah understanding has to penetrate into everything. It can't just be that you're shunning your body and you're sitting all day in yeshiva and then your heart and your body and we have to be whole. The whole system has to work body, mind, heart, and soul. And that's a messianic reality. It's not, if in the Alter Rebbe's generation, he could say, just Ruchnius, no Gashmius. And people could just, I'm not into
And
Gashmius.
people could do it.
I don't need to. Now we need to take Gashmius and use it for holy purposes and elevate the Gashmius. Otherwise, we can't.
It's a very deep thing. I think I have to like think about it.
That's a good thing.
I mean, I guess you're saying that the Alter Rebbe said that you could do that and now we can't. I guess that's, since you know that already, that's.
The opposite. The Alter Rebbe said in those days, too much Gashmius is going to create a deficit. How did he say it?
A deficit in Ruchnius?
He said a superior quality in the physical is a deficiency in the spiritual. But the Bavitcher Rebbe didn't say it like that. Our Rebbe, he said that a hole in the body will create a hole in the soul.
Right.
So it's a different avoda. You can't be in that state anymore of I'm just, I'm from in my head and I'm cut off. A hole in the body now in our times creates a hole in the soul. You've got to look at your body and your being and your relationships and your environment and everything. It all has to be part of your avoda. You can't just like a little compartment.
Is that because there's more? It seems to me like that would be because there's more tumah because we're so close to the end or something like that.
It's not because there's more tumah. It's because there's more light, and it's because there's more light and we have more ability to elevate all parts of reality.
Oh.
Because messianic.
Oh, okay. I think I get it now. I thought it was because there was too much tumah, but you're saying it's normal light now.
Incredible depression in the world. As we've moved hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years forward, there's actually less disease and less depression, less overbearing
dangers
from public institutions. And so we've been able to move literally out of the shtetl, literally, and that's the movement of the entire world. And so the body actually can do great damage to the neshama. And the body is necessary for making that relationship with the neshama now. Right? And actually what endures ultimately for those 2,000 years is the body.
So it's because we've evolved, and it's because we are becoming more able to integrate our bodily selves for the sake of our spiritual lives, without losing our spiritual lives. So to go back to, the 1700s when they were living in great danger, pogroms, darkness, and to extrapolate and to not see that now we're on the edge of Mashiachness, which is integration and that light of the revelation of Torah has to penetrate into the physical world as well, your physical world and the physical world.
Another very easy way to look at it is, in those days there was so much danger, there was no way to protect oneself, and Hashem moved us forward, so we literally have an army today.
Right.
Can you say that louder, Shoshana?
Well, Shoshana said that now we actually have our own country, we have an army, we have physical strength. We were in a different situation as a people. Now we've come into our land, we have tanks, we have soldiers, we have armies. The whole relationship to us in reality shifted. Anyway, so that's it. I'm glad you asked the question. I think it's a good question, and I think it gave me an opportunity to actually explain something that's very, very important, that the new Judaism, the new era of, it says when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a new Torah. It's integrated. We have to learn how to make everything count. It's not just actions, it's stomach, it's heart, it's feelings, it's everything. All has to be working together like a whole happy tree. Not just the roots, not just the trunk, but the branches, the fruit, the leaves, the whole thing.
It's very beautiful.
It is.
I think.
I mean, just the fact that we got the state of Israel, it's like, that's already just, the beginning of, like you just said. Okay, thank you.
All right. Have a
I
good
appreciate
night,
it.
everyone. All right.
Sorry I came on late, but